All right, welcome everybody to our next session with Nate Rowlan. He is a senior CSM and L&D expert at Thrive, as well as a learning enthusiast. And he's going to talk to us today about cracking the barrier to change an organization that we know as culture. So I'm going to turn things over to Nate.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it, and good morning to everybody. If you're out in the U.S., I'm in the Central Time Zone, so I know there's a few names that I know that you're scattered over here. If you're in the UK or EU, good afternoon. But thanks for joining. The topic is cracking culture, so really taking a dive into culture change, what that means, what does it mean for people in learning and development, and I'm really excited to talk about it. It's a subject that I'm pretty passionate about, and hopefully today you'll take away some stuff that you can bring back to your department, your team, your organization, to really impact the culture. A little bit about me. My name is Nate. I've worked in learning and development for a long time now, leading teams, and culture change just always happens to be something that I'm either tasked with helping with, outright, like, hey, you need to lead this effort, or brought in from a learning perspective to help reinforce culture. So it seems like no matter where I go or what I do within the world of learning and development, culture is always like the hot topic, the thing that you kind of continually get challenged with. So what does it mean to enact culture change? What is involved? What does that look like? That's what we'll really be talking about today. So a couple of things, like I'd love audience participation. So with the Q&A that we have, use that. You can chat, you can respond back to me, you can ask formal questions if you want me to say something else. There's some reactions here, so if you like something, let me know. If you don't like something, I'll even take your like virtual boos. So I think I have thick enough skin, I can handle that. If you want to say boo, I hate that idea, go for it. Bring it on. So but do all that. You can use the Q&A again, or the reaction button, but that kind of lets me know what's going on. And I'm going to ask you guys some questions, so hopefully we'll get some feedback and make it a little bit more interactive. When it comes to like cracking culture, I'm going to be talking about it in 3 different ways. So the word cracking, it kind of playing on that word a little bit. The first way is like cracking a safe, right? We want to decode and kind of get into what culture really is before we start to like talk about actually how to change it. The next is like in the breaking down walls, right? We want to crack through the obstacles, the things that are put up that prevent culture change. So that's sort of the second way we'll talk about culture change. And the third is an absolute mystery. I'll get to that at the end. And so we'll kind of circle back to that last bit of how we'll talk about cracking culture. But really to start off, let's just define culture so we have kind of this baseline of what it is we're talking about today. So when it comes to culture, definition, going to the Cambridge Dictionary, the way of life, especially the general customs and beliefs of a particular group of people at a particular time. If we're thinking about business, you have the ideas and ways of working that are typical for an organization and that affect how it does business and how its employees behave. So to simplify all of this, we can just say culture is what people do and how they do it. So thinking about culture, it's the things we do, it's the way we do things, and that's what we're really trying to change. So this is where I'd love for you to jump into the Q&A and send some answers here. In your opinion, what things comprise culture? What are those things in your mind when you're thinking about culture? What are those things that make up culture? So use the Q&A function. Send me some answers. What are those things to you that make up, comprise, build, or the foundation, whatever, of culture? The things that you look at when you're thinking about culture and say, oh, okay, I can identify that. I can identify this. And that really helps you understand culture. So I'll give you just a second. Use the Q&A function. All right, we have diversity. Thank you, Kayla. What else? Surely Kayla is not the only one with the keyboard. Guys, just another second here. The perspectives and approaches of the employees and their lived experiences. Yep, thank you, Allison. Anything else? When you're thinking kind of in a broad sense, right? You can think about all the small things that make us feel like this is what a culture is. So it could be food, it could be music, right? It could be particular dance, right? You go to some areas in the world and there's like, oh man, you got to go to this part of town and they do this traditional dance, right? And those things are like these easily identified pieces of culture, right? The perspectives, how we approach doing things, right? There's a lot that goes into that. Even within the US is actually quite a big place, and people sometimes forget that. You can go to different areas within the US even and find different aspects of culture. The permission to be authentic. Yes, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, being authentic, being who you are, being able to be yourself is definitely a part of culture. So when you're thinking about all these little building blocks, all the little things that make up culture, it's kind of a complex thing, right? It's a tapestry of different items that make it up. So it's not just one simple thing when we're talking about culture. However, a lot of people throw culture out there as if it's like a simple, easy, pile of clay that you can just mold. It's a lot of random little things that make up culture. Going into some statistics, just to kind of, again, begin to decode culture and think about culture in the sense of the workplace, there's some really interesting insights that are out right now. In the US, just 23% of employees strongly agree that they can apply their organization's values to their work every day. Only 27% strongly agree that they believe in their organization's values. So you can use the reaction button here, and this is where I'm curious. So give me a thumbs up. Does this resonate with you? Does this seem like what it's like in your organization? You think that just around, maybe a quarter or so of the employees can actually apply any sort of culture to their actual work? I definitely got at least one thumbs up there. Yeah. So this stat to me feels really, really real. It's been my experience in most organizations. I would say most places I've worked, I would say it might be even less than the 23%, and definitely less than the 27% that believe in their organization's values. One of the things, again, working in learning and development over the years, is you sort of get in this bubble, this hype bubble of where you're talking the values are like at the front of mind, and then you got to get into the crowd, right, into the mix of actual people, and it's a much different experience. They're not talking about the values. It is a thing that's up on the wall, but it's not something that's talked about. It's not something that's necessarily even understood. So I think these stats are pretty telling. 69% of organizations that adapted amid the pandemic say culture offers a competitive advantage. So this was big, right? We're coming off of several years, and I hate to use the word unprecedented, but a very unprecedented times where things had to change, right? So the companies or organizations that did adapt, they really believe that culture offers competitive advantage. 41% feel that maintaining community was more difficult during the pandemic. I also feel these two stats are very interesting. That sense of community, that sense of belonging, and that correlation between what culture is. If you don't feel you belong, is it easy to be part of that culture? And I think the short answer to that is no. 72% report that culture helps successful change initiatives happen. So again, if you're thinking about the culture in your organization, if you have a good culture, it's more likely that anything you're trying to change or do differently, right, is going to go quicker, smoother, less speed bumps, be more adapted by people within the business. But this stat right here, 77% of senior management feel connected to the company's purpose versus 54% for everybody else. So if culture is important in helping change initiatives within your organization, why is there this gap between senior management and everybody else in terms of how they believe in or feel connected to the company's culture? So I'll go back to the Q&A, that using it kind of as a chat function. What do you guys think? What is the reason for this gap between senior management and everybody else in the organization and how they feel connected? What is your thought? What is that gap? What does it represent? Why is it there? What are your thoughts on that? So go ahead. You can use the Q&A, type in an answer. I'm curious what you have to say. Communication. Yeah, I would agree. Communication is a big one. Anybody else? Anything else? Thank you, Kayla, for sharing that. It's all right. So yeah, communication is a big one. I would agree. I'm actually going to come back to that communication piece a little bit in a little bit. Let's see, Allison. A lot of times there's a lack of analysis of boots on the ground. Yeah, I would also agree. I think there's this kind of missing piece for like what's actually going on. The ability to feel safe and vulnerable. Yep, I think that's also big, right? I think that even affects how people respond to polls that go out, surveys. It really matters. If you feel safe, you're more likely to respond, share some truth. If not, you might be just kind of towing the party line. Understanding the real day-to-day experiences of the employees. Yeah, because there might be this massive misalignment between this lofty thing that the senior leaders are talking about and what the reality is when you're working with people day to day, and that disconnect, right, can represent this gap as well. All right, thank you guys for sharing. A few more stats. These are coming from SHRM. 72% of workers think that their culture is good or very good. 20% rated as average. 7% consider their workplace culture poor or very poor. And globally, 89% of workers said that since the beginning of the pandemic, their workplace culture has improved or stay the same. Again, sharing some of these stats just so we can understand kind of where people at and see, hey, does this actually reflect with your understanding of how people view culture within the workplace? I think that the kind of change over the course of the pandemic to where we are today, I think is really interesting to look at in terms of how people view culture, where it sits in terms of how people appreciate it, think about it, or even the expectations they have around it. So leaning into that kind of goes to this next piece, the Great Resignation. 45% of people have thought about leaving their current organization, and 30% have actively searched for a new job in the past 6 months. And I'll probably add that the other stat that's not included by SHRM is that 70% have actively searched for a new job in the past 6 months, but are lying about it on the survey. So people have left. People have changed jobs. There's a lot of research going into that right now to try to explain it. Some of it has to do with where culture is, and people don't want to put up with it. So if they have a job they can do freelance, if they can go on Fiverr, if they can drive Uber, if they can do anything else where they don't have to endure all of the other stuff that comes with working for a company, they're looking for other options. All of that to me speaks to culture and what goes on with the business. Again, we're going back to that simple definition of what we do and how we do it. If people don't like what we do, if people don't like how we do it, right, they're not going to stay around. So you can make culture simple if you think about it in those terms, even though it is a kind of a complex thing. Then it gets to like, well, the workplace is changing, right? Are we working from home? Is it hybrid? Is it return to office? You can have an infinite amount of debates about that. And this is a massive quote. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but what really sticks out is Forbes published this article. They teamed up with Harvard Business School. Again, they spent money on this, but here's the statement right in the middle. As we're preparing to get back to business as usual, it seems professionals don't want business as usual. So if that resonates with you, give me a thumbs up. If not, you can give me a sad face or something like that. Clap. That's great. Thank you. To me, I'm thinking this as well. I'm not going to get into a debate of where you should be working. It's clear that I'm right out of my home. And I like that. But the idea that any job that I take from now on, I don't want this old business as usual approach. Give me something different. I know that I can work differently than I did, the other, 15 years of my professional career. I can do things differently, and I've proven that, and we've all proven that. So culture has to reflect that as well. How do we do things, right? What is it that we do? How do we do it? That all has to matter. Some examples that really have stood out to me, Google's one. So in March of 2022, Google tells all of their employees, right, we want you to return back to the office by April. And 11 months later, Google starts asking employees to share desks amid office downsizing. Again, I'm going to turn to the Q&A here because I'll let you guys fill in the blanks. What does this say to you about the culture at Google? If you're a Google employee and you get this message in March, and then by February, 11 months later, you get this office that, hey, I'll pick on some people in the chat here. Allison, you and Sarah now are going to be sharing desk. I know 11 months ago, we asked you to come back in the office, and then you were working in your home office and felt comfortable. But now we want you two to share a desk. Yeah, you'd be frustrated. You don't actually matter. We don't care about you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you begin to feel less and less like you are a person, right? A human with dignity. You don't feel respected, right? Are they trying to drive people away? That's a great question. Is that what you're trying to do? Are you trying to get me to quit? Because this is the kind of thing that would make me do it, right? I don't want to share a desk. So yeah, I think you guys get the picture. One more example that I want to share, and this is Twitter. So since Elon Musk has taken over, right, there's been a lot of things that have come out. This one has stood out to me, and I've kind of sat on this tweet for a while. This is going back to October of last year. But here's a scenario. Elon Musk has taken over Twitter. He gets an email notification because he's in leadership that he's up for some training. We're all in learning and development. I'm sure at some point you've worked on a leadership development program or a new hire program that you've had some sort of aspect in, or role in managing a learning platform. You put a lot of hard work. You put a lot of TLC into these programs. If you're doing instructional design, you have spent hours upon hours building this, right? Only to have your CEO basically go out to the world and put you on blast and making fun of your product. So again, I'm going to go to the chat. What does this say to you about culture? You're in learning and development. This is a learning and development thing getting called out over Twitter. What does this make you think about the culture at Twitter? I think Elon is a robot and he has no feelings. Yeah, definitely no degree of empathy when sending out that tweet. Starts from the top down. If he doesn't care about learning and culture, why should others? Yeah. Elon doesn't understand culture. Yep. Yeah. And I think, Daniela, I think you hit a really strong point here. If he doesn't care about learning, why should anybody else in the organization? I say it all the time. I spend a lot of my workday now talking with other people in learning and development, advising them, helping them look at their programs. And one thing that I always tell them is if you can get senior leadership involved, if you can get their buy-in, if you can get them to share it instead of you having to be the person that shares it, there's a lot more value in that, right? But here we have an example of a CEO basically calling out learning as like something stupid that he shouldn't have to do, and like, oh, can't wait for the next one. So culture is important, and I think we're identifying that it does as you put it, Danielle, it does start from the top, right? It does. I think there's kind of two ways. It either starts at the top and goes down, or you have the reverse of that, which can be equally dangerous, of that revolution from the bottom, right? That bottom up, right? So there has to be leadership involved, unless it's going to be completely chaotic. So going through all of that, let's dive into a few culture myths. Where does culture maybe go wrong? Where do we misunderstand it? Where do maybe efforts die around learning and development and culture? So culture myth number one is this myth that there is a personal and professional self. Now you may say, but there is, or there should be. I have had this kind of thought in the back of my head, something that just kind of bothers me when we start talking about personal and professional self. The reason is and here's an example, right? If I am an unethical person in my personal life, what are the prospects? What's the chance that I'm going to be able to come to work and be a very ethical person? Right? If I am an angry person, if I get angered easily, if I have a high temper, what are the chances that that is not going to be part of my bucket, my personality, or that thing that I bring to the professional area? It's this idea that we can be two people. We can't. There isn't a personal and professional self. I'm not the only one to start to question this and call this out. Now, these are several articles. You can do a Google search yourself and start to look into this. I don't know if there's a definitive answer, but what I can tell you is that this is very much in that myth thing. There might be some truth to it. And yes, we can do professional development. We can become more professional. But really, the truth is that we are a single person, right? We can behave differently, but it's not like we're these two separated individuals, one in a personal space, one in that professional space. And if anything, sometimes these myths can cause a lot of separation. They can be discriminatory. I think earlier in the chat, we're talking about what makes up culture. And I want to say, Kayla, you said diversity. If you're looking at diversity, this concept has been used for years to actually discriminate. So understanding kind of where this is and where it fits into your spectrum. Professional development, I'm not saying don't ever use that term. Use that term. We need to develop as professionals, but it's not that we're developing this separate persona or this separate side of us. It is the side of us. And especially when we're talking about bringing your whole self to work, right? Or this kind of more holistic approach to being in the workplace, this, the foundation that this idea of a personal and professional self begins to get even more unsteady. This leads into the second myth, which is this idea of work-life balance. Again, if you look at, job postings and people are talking about their culture, people are sharing, why come work here, right? They'll throw out work-life balance. Again, I believe that this is a myth as well. And I'll quickly share with you why I think this is a myth. So here's my question. Again, use the Q&A, type in an answer. No wrong or right answers, but here's the question I have for you. Have you ever thought about work when at one of these places or one of these times? Here are a few examples. You can send out any others that pop into your head. But have you ever thought about work things when you're at the gym, when you're in the shower, if you're at your kid's sporting event, church, lunch, in the middle of the night, in the car or on your commute? And I'm getting yeses. So yeah, I think that you have. So it's not that we can't find balance between the two, but I'll be honest with you. I've had some of my best work ideas while at the gym. Yeah, and that's what I'm seeing over the chat as well. So yeah, Kayla is saying that's where my great ideas come from. Yeah, mine as well. I have been at the gym and had a great idea. I've been in the shower and had a great idea. I've been in the car on a weekend driving and I've had a great idea. And who benefits from that? Well, the organization I work for does. So it's not that, right, we can't have work-life balance. It's just the idea that there is this somewhat of a separation. Because the truth is that when you work for a business, when you work for an organization, they take up real estate in your mind, right? It's not just the time that you're there. Our minds aren't built to separate things. It's sort of an all or nothing deal. So you're going to have ideas or thoughts about work. What happens if something bad happens at work? Maybe you have a bad interaction. That doesn't turn off, right? When you walk away, when you clock out, or you go somewhere else, those things linger with us and you process that. It does take up time. So it's this idea, right, that I'm talking about when it's a culture myth, that there is this huge balance. So it's more of understanding that work and life, when you work somewhere, when you work for a business, it becomes part of your life. Over the course of the pandemic, working from home, taking on all those challenges, having my kid do school, we're all in the house together. You really quickly, those things started to kind of just all blend together. And they really haven't, for me at least, separated back out like they once maybe felt. So this blend of work and life is really what I'm talking about. That it's not necessarily that it's a separate thing and we're going to give you this box for this and this box for that, but it's this holistic approach to understanding that, hey, we work and we live, and these two things are very much intertwined. It's about the respect of work and life, not necessarily that we're trying to balance the two out. Myth number 3, a workplace is like family. Again, I have had this said to me at several organizations. We're really family based. We're a family. We feel like a family. When you're here, you're part of a bigger family. I've worked in a lot of businesses where that's sort of the thing that's said. And to me, it's not healthy. And I'll explain. There are things that I will do for my wife that I will not do for a business. There are things that, you don't lay off your family. Yeah, you can't. There are things that I will do for my children that I won't do for a company. I would go to jail for my kids, right? I'm not going to do that for a company or for a paycheck. So the idea that, this expectation that work is like family, I think it's just an unfair analogy. And I think at some level that actually sticks with people. The people that it doesn't stick with, it creates a really toxic environment. If you've ever worked at a business where people say, hey, this is we have a real family culture here, you're part of our family. What happens when you leave that family? You've now invested in all those relationships, you've now invested in those people, and when you walk away, what often happens is you're instantly replaced, you're ostracized. So thank you, London. You're gone. And now, you can't replace grandma. I'm not saying I'm grandma, but maybe I am. You can't replace grandma, right? So it's this weird idea of that, like, hey, you've been replaced, and then people don't talk to you anymore. So those people that were your family, now you're out. And so it actually is a bit more like a cult, to be honest. Again, I'm not the only one that has these thoughts. There's articles all over the place. HBR, The Atlantic. There's even a pretty good TED talk on this, that, avoid doing this. There are other analogies. To me, I think if you want to talk about your work and you need to find a way to talk about it, I much prefer using the idea of a team, because, here's the deal. I've played sport. I've coached sport most of my life. I have played alongside people that I could not stand as a person. But when we had a common goal, right, we made those differences work out pretty quickly and focused on winning. Very much different than how I would approach that within a family environment. Where in a family environment, I need to work through everything. I need to talk through everything. Is that going to get me to the finish line? Is that going to get me to the goal? It might, but it's going to take a lot more time. And in business, we don't always have that kind of time. And I don't necessarily need to love or like every single person that I have to work with. I just need to be able to work with them and achieve the goals that I need to achieve, right? So it's about rethinking kind of the analogies that we use, the way we talk about it. We had to put some change there. the next one is that busyness is good business. There's someone I know, and when they talk about their work, they always talk about it in volume of emails they've responded to. Now this is an older person that I know, and it's just like, I did so many emails, I did this many emails, I did, and it's like volume of things done. And my question always is, so what did that do, right? What does all that mean? Like, how did things get better or worse? Like, because it's never talked about in terms of like progressing forward or return on investment, revenues up, or a decrease in loss or whatever. It's never talked. It's just talked about in terms of busyness. And I think that in the past, and we're going back 20, 30, even 50 years ago, when there weren't as many ways to measure things, to track, maybe busyness looked like good business, because the busier you looked, the more successful or productive people thought you were. The truth is I think and I know that just because you're busy doesn't mean that good things are happening. So again, it's not anything that's just coming out of Nate's head. You can read more about that. If you do a Google search, you'll start to see that during the pandemic, this actually became a really hot topic. What's the productivity loss, or what does it look like now that we're working remotely? Microsoft started, letting people really track what people are doing and trying to get this like productivity score. It was actually a big kind of controversial thing. So does measuring the busyness actually mean anything? For me, I would say that anytime you're in an organization and it's just the hyper focus is on the busyness, the volume of work, or like how many, you're looking at the wrong metrics, you're looking at the wrong things. And from a cultural perspective, this is not going to be a positive workplace. It's going to be the focus, that spotlight is on things that are going to burn people out, wear people down, and be a real, I don't know, freaking grind. That's the only way I know to put it. So busyness is good business. That's another myth. So then what, right? So I've talked about sort of what culture is. We've gone through myths, kind of focused on the kind of the negative side of things. So then what are some actionable steps? So what can we actually do to impact culture and to affect culture change? Well, the first thing that I believe we should be doing is acknowledge that work is a transactional relationship. So I'll pause there for a second. Work is a transactional relationship. And to kind of expand on this, a transaction represents an exchange of value and is typically based upon getting as much as one can in exchange for a set amount of work or item. Now, at some point, each and every person on this call today, you have applied for a job. Some of you maybe recently, some of you in the last few years, but at some point you have. At the very beginning, this is the first thing you're looking at. What is it I'm going to be doing, and how much are they going to pay me to do it? That is transactional, right? So the nature, the basis of work, the work that you and I do, even though we can think about it in all sorts of different terms, the basis of that is transactional. So if we ignore that and act that it's not, we're really, really missing out. Now, when you think about that transactional change, there's really only two options. Option number one is the shift to transformative relationships. Now, I don't want to say that this is a myth, but this is where a lot of organizations are really hung up, right? It's a shift of not talking about work as a transactional thing, but talking about it as in terms of like, people are really connected to what we do. People really believe in that we're making a change and making a difference. I do think that is important. So I'm not downplaying that at all. But if you get hung up there, and that's the only way you talk about your culture, it's the only way you talk about your business, I think you're in for a world of hurt. Because if you can't get people to buy in, if you can't get people to believe, then and the transactional side is bad, people aren't going to feel valued. They're not going to feel loved. They're not going to feel respected. They're not going to feel the buy-in. So the other thing that you can do here is improve the quality of the transactions. So again, if you're thinking about transactional relationships, right? I'm going to do this for you and you'll do this for me. What do those transactions look like? So first, what does your pay system look like, right? Is it easy for employees to get paid, to see what their pay is going to be? Is it easy for someone to ask for time off or see, what kind of PTO they have? Is it easy for somebody to share an idea or thought within the business? What is your communication like within your organization? Do you have systems and tools in place? Do you have clear expectations set around how meetings are, booked or set up? Have you thought about all those transactional things that are the day-to-day basis of our jobs, right? What we do and how we do it, that transactional aspect. So yes, I would say absolutely shift to transformative relationships. Start making that shift. That is a long-term thing when you start thinking about getting people to believe in sort of the better good or the greater good or these higher and loftier concepts. Absolutely put effort and energy into that. But if you don't focus on number two, improving the quality of transactions, things aren't going to improve from a cultural perspective. If you get number two right, a lot of times number one starts to happen independently. So I would say focus and improve the quality of the transactions first, and then you'll start seeing that transformative aspect become at least easier to accomplish. Number two, create accountability for values because they're either important or they're not. And I'll ask you guys, and you can just do a hands up or a thumbs up using the emojis here, the reactions. Have you ever worked for an organization where you didn't feel that the values that they talked about actually mattered to anybody? Yep, seeing thumbs up. Yes. So yeah, I think we all have, right? If the values don't matter, then it becomes a negative thing, right? I'm getting a yup. Yeah. So we've definitely all worked at organizations where they'll post something on the wall. They may even ask you to memorize it. Like, hey, we're gonna do a contest, and whoever can memorize our mission statement, is gonna receive, get a $5 gift card, right? So a lot of businesses do that, but then they don't actually. It doesn't actually matter. No one actually cares. They do things the opposite way. If you're going to have values, make sure you're creating accountability for it. And let me just go back to kind of the intro this talk this morning. That this could be you working at the overall organization level. This could be you just focusing on your team. This could be you just focusing on like a larger department. You can apply these things at all different levels. But if you need to start somewhere and you're leading a team of people or you're on a team of people, start there and say, okay, maybe the rest of the organization doesn't, but within this team, within this department, we're actually going to have some accountability around these things because we believe in them. And if they're gonna be important, we're gonna make them important. A really good quote here. Leaders have to explain the values and tell the story of how they are lived within the organization. They need to explain how their decisions reflect the values. Now, not at the organization I'm at today, but my last organization, this is one of the conversations I had. We'd gone through a couple of merger and acquisitions, really kind of challenging time that puts a lot of stress on people. And my thing was, let's tell the story of why we did this and how we did it through the lens of our values, like why this is actually connected to who we are and who we say we are. It puts a whole new spin on it, right? It explains a lot of things, like why would we do this? So if your leaders aren't doing this, then people never learn the lessons, right? Let's go back to one of the suggestions at the beginning. If you say that diversity is one of your values, we value diversity, and yet leaders can't point or talk about how their hiring practices, how they post their jobs, where they're posting jobs, how they promote, how they interview. If they're not talking about that from a value perspective, right? Then does it actually matter? Yep, this, and they need to do so lay friendly way to set the yes. They need to speak it in a way that everybody can understand, right? In the vernacular, in the common language of the people. So send it out in some gifts, send it out in a meme. Use the way that people communicate and find a way to communicate your values. We made this decision, and this decision is aligned with our value of X. And what that means to us is this, and that's why we would do this, right? And that's we go back to that Elon Musk tweet. Is completely devoid of values, of references to like how decisions should be made at Twitter. If I'm a leader at Twitter, what do I glean from Elon's decision? How can I understand that and then make my own decisions as a leader so I'm successful within the business? So it not only explains things and reinforces the value, but it teaches other leaders how to lead within the business because they can see the example, they can see the justification via the values, the mission, the vision, the purpose, whatever it is that the organization has. So my last part of this is that if you're going to have a value, don't have a value without a KPI. You wouldn't go to your operations, group and say, hey, go do this thing, but you don't have to have any KPIs. There would be KPIs all over the place. KPI is a key performance indicator, meaning something that's measurable. You can measure stuff, right? If I'll go back, diversity. If diversity is something that is your value, you can measure that. If trust is something, right, you can measure that. Now, again, it might be nuanced. You may have to have a think about it. You may need to bring 2 or 3 people in a room and say, okay, trust is one of our things. What does trust look like in an organization? You can go to the dark side. What is bad? What does low trust look like? Okay, so that's our baseline. That's where we don't want to be. What does high trust look like? Okay, and that's here. And then you start associating actions with both, right? The negative, so the low trust and the high trust. Don't set a value if you can't put a KPI to it. Something that's measurable, that you can report, that can be on people's performance plans. So when it's performance review times, you can actually measure how they lived out those values. Because again, values are either important or they're not. And if you don't make them important, if you don't put a metric there, if you don't measure it, if it's not part of a performance plan, right, then there's no value to the values. They're just empty words. They're a poster on the wall. There's something you've made people read on your website, but they don't really mean anything inside the business. Number 3 is to set clear, visible, and measurable goals. So Daniela, a minute ago, you talked about like a lay-friendly way, right? So that everybody can understand it. Goals, to me, are one of the most important things. How we set goals within a business, how we communicate like what we're trying to achieve, and how every employee fits into that is so significant. So there's 3 things in this statement. It has to be clear, right? Easy to understand. It needs to be visible, meaning people can see it. And then it has to be measurable, meaning that we should be able to know if we're winning, if we're losing, where we're at. Are we doing a good job? Are we not doing a good job? If you can get goal setting in your organization to this place, I guarantee you the culture will almost instantly improve. People will feel aligned. People will start doing things that make sense. And a lot of that junk that makes a bad culture will fade out without having to do a whole lot of other stuff. I know I'm not going to say there's any one magic bullet, but if there is a magic bullet in getting culture, like an instant culture improvement, I'm not saying it's going to completely fix everything. This would be the thing I would say, like, double down on this. So use a simple formula, X to Y by when. And I'm not going to like hide anything here. I'm lifting this straight from the 4 disciplines of execution. So if you've ever seen or, Franklin Covey stuff, read a book, been to, a webinar, this is lifted straight from that. X to Y by when. X is we're here today. Y is we want to go here. And when is the time frame. So we want to, it could be in these goals can be around anything, but it's usually around what your business is trying to achieve. So an example is I worked in a business in over 10 years ago, and we had a really interesting goal. They wanted to go public, and so the goal they set was around EBITDA. Now, EBITDA is not something the average employee understands at all. So we spent a lot of time, and this is where learning and development got brought in. We spent a lot of time teaching about it, teaching about how different aspects of the business impact that. And then the goal was set in X to Y by win format. So we want to go from this to this by the end of the year. And then every leader within the business, their job was to work with their teams to say, this is our goal, then that impacts that goal. And every single goal that was set, so it kind of cascades or waterfalls, whatever you want to say, was signed off on by the CEO. And on top of that, this is the kind of the next piece I'm going to share, is we were held accountable by having to post up scoreboards. So every department you would walk in, now again, this is back when everybody had to be in the office, but everywhere you went, there was a visible scoreboard. So you could see if every team was winning or if they were losing. So I got sports examples here. You can see St. Louis City beating Charlotte in the first home opener for Major League Soccer. You can see London Irish. This is a rugby match. You can see them beating Bath 35-5. You can see Michael Jordan about to dunk on some people, right? I guarantee you he was looking at the scoreboard. He could tell you at any time if he is winning, if he's losing, and what he needed to do next to try to impact that scoreboard. It's that same idea that if you have clear, visible, measurable goals, you start to see behavior shift in a very interesting way. So if you think about driving by a park and you see some people, let's say you see a handful of people playing soccer, right? They're playing just a pickup game, or maybe they're playing basketball, and they're just playing a pickup game. You grab a whiteboard, walk up, put a line in the middle, and start keeping score. I absolutely guarantee you the way those people are playing will shift. You'll see an instant change to be more competitive, more aware of what's going on, probably a little bit more assertive, because when you're keeping score and when there's a visible scoreboard, it puts people out. People have to think about it. They have to do something with it, and it keeps everybody on accountable, right? We're going back to that word, accountable. So accountability is an underlying factor of a really good positive culture. So use that formula, X to Y by win. It's simple, it's easy, it's clear, it's measurable. All the things I said. Have some scoreboards up so people know if they're winning or losing. Even if you don't do that really drastic example of going department by department, if your organization just says, this is what we're trying to do this year, we're going from here to here by the end of the year, and here's the scoreboard so you can know if we're winning or losing, that is enough to begin to shift culture in a really, really positive way, because people all of a sudden feel aligned. So again, we talked about going from transactional to transformative. When you have that scoreboard, when you have a clear goal, people begin to shift that mindset almost instantly. As deceptively simple as this may seem, many leaders often struggle to translate their strategic concepts into a single from X to Y by win. But once they've done it, both they and all the teams they lead have gained tremendous clarity. So it is about providing that clarity. You can have a purpose statement, but to me, having a really clear goal, I would say almost beats a purpose statement every single time, because people can really talk about what they're doing, how their day-to-day actually impacts that, the work they can talk about their work in a really positive, engaged, charged way. Number 4, I would say encourage boundaries. So I talked about that work-life balance being a myth. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a balance. I'm just saying that things bleed over. There's a lot of gray area. Encourage boundaries. This is a quote from Brene Brown. When we fail to set boundaries and hold people accountable's coming up again, we feel used, mistreated. This is why we sometimes attack who they are, which is far more hurtful than addressing a behavior or a choice. So setting boundaries can really help prevent this. And an easy way to do this, so if you're a leader today, this is something you can take away instantly. Even if you just want to see some change within your team, and here's a handful of things you can change. Change the behavior for vacations. Like, are you communicating like, hey, I'm taking PTO time. I want to make sure you guys do as well. Make sure you take time off. I want to see you guys scheduling some time off, even if it may change or it's not set in stone. I want you to go ahead and block some time off in your calendar. What does it look like if people take off for a hobby? If like, hey, I'm going to be speaking at a conference, so I'm going to take some time off. Do people talk about, hey, I'm taking sick time, or my kid's sick, I'm going to say, stay home, or, I'm going to be off. I have a sporting event for my kid, or I had a school play, or I'm just going to go, on a field trip. Can people see everybody's calendars? Is there that transparency? Is there a strategy for workload sharing when team members are gone, so people actually feel they can take time off? Now, I know all of this is very time off heavy, but again, if you're looking to do this, if you're looking to encourage boundaries for your team, I would say it really starts here. Do people feel that they can take time away? Do people feel that it's okay to do things differently? Encourage those boundaries so people can actually start to benefit from everything. Yeah, it is very much starting with the basics, Danielle. But we get so many businesses I've worked in get this wrong, where leaders don't talk about it in this way, where people don't have healthy, it's okay to take time off. It's okay to use your PTO. It's okay to take a sick day. If anything that I would say we should have learned from the pandemic is that if you are sick, do not come into a workplace. Stay home. Right? We don't need to keep passing stuff around. So use your PTO, use your sick days, encourage that amongst your peers, encourage that among the people that you lead. 5, establish the North Star. So this is the last of my action items here. Establish the North Star. And if you think about the North Star, and you can use the chat, what is the North Star? And the North Star's official name is Polaris. But what is Polaris, the North Star? What is that used for? Why would I say establish the North Star? What is the North Star used for? What have people done with that historically? Yeah, what guides you? Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Daniela. Stay on track. Yes, perfect. Thank you, Lita. Yeah, it is absolutely. It helps you reorient. It helps you make sure you're going in the right direction. It helps guide you. So Polaris, the North Star, it's not fixed. We're in a galaxy. We're moving, but because of the rotation of us in the universe, it's pretty much fixed. Now it's slightly off north, but it's always in the same place in the night sky, right? So it's historically been used to navigate. If you know where the North Star is, you can get your bearings. You can figure out longitude, and latitude. You can learn how to navigate. Just like the North Star, right? If we can figure out what that is in business, it will help your employees stay on track, reorient, be guided, help in their decision making. In looking this up, I found this really amazing quote. This is coming from a National Geographic article, How Reading the Night Sky Helped Black Americans Survive. So they're talking about, enslaved Black people escaping slavery from the South, going to the North, to the Underground Railroad. The constellations held important cultural stories and lessons that were passed down through generations. That oral storytelling tradition became an important tool for Harriet Tubman, Josiah Henson, and others who used signal songs, such as Follow the Drinking Gourd, to convey detailed instructions for taking the Underground Railroad to freedom. The Drinking Gourd was a code name for the Big Dipper constellation, which was used to locate Polaris, the North Star. So this is a complete side note. I thought this was just an amazing, beautiful, quick snippet of a story to say that this happened. People have used this. This is a really interesting way. And I really love how it became part of sort of the mythology and the storytelling and the songs, right? All of that to me screams culture. So the historical culture was used to then point to the North Star to then help them on a literal path to freedom. To me, it's just a beautiful, beautiful way to think about this. The North Star for your organization can be anything. It can be your mission statement. It can be your purpose statement. It can be your values. It can be guiding principles. It can be a mantra. It's just whatever it is, pick something and make that your North Star. Every time I look at these lists of like, what are the top 5 skills or the emerging skills for 2023, I've been looking at these lists for 15 plus years. And something that always comes up is this idea of critical thinking, decision making, and that leaders, we need people to be able to make decisions without having to ask a lot of questions. The reason people can't is because they don't know that they don't have that North Star. They don't have a guiding. They don't have a place to get their bearings and stay on track. If you give people a North Star, if you give them something then you'll start to see that critical thinking or that decision-making skills, you'll see it start to improve. Because then you can say, hey, when you're making decisions, you just need to ask yourself this: does it align to your mission statement? If yes, we want you to go ahead and take that risk. We trust you. If not, don't do it. If you can say to yourself, this is out of line with our mission statement, then we want you to say no. If it's in line with your mission statement, we want you to say yes, take that risk. We're going to put trust in you, right? So that's where you can see a massive improvement in the way people critically think, make decisions, lead their teams, and grow your business. So positive culture, having a North Star, feeling empowered to follow that North Star is equally important. So here are 5 things you can do to crack culture, to make a change: acknowledge that work is a transactional relationship, create accountability for values, set clear, visible, measurable goals, encourage boundaries, establish the North Star. I told you at the very beginning that we're going to talk about cracking culture in 3 ways, right? We're going to kind of break the safe, crack the code, break down the walls, and the last one was the mystery. So here's the mystery one. This is the 3rd way we'll talk about it, and it is called cracking culture. Now, I have no clue if anybody's from Ireland, but the word C-R-A-I-C, pronounced crack also, is a very Irish word. Does anybody in the chat, you can use the Q&A and type it, does anybody know what crack in Irish means? It has nothing to do with drugs. Does anybody know what crack is? I'm going to take that silence as a no. I'll share with you. All right. So the word crack itself means fun. As the Irish would say, let's go have some crack or enjoy the crack. So you're thinking about this concept of having a good time, of enjoyment, of fun, of like a good night out, right? We want to have cracking culture as well, a fun culture, a positive environment. It's almost St. Patrick's Day, so this is really relevant background for you. You can take that away and use the word crack. Now, a lot of businesses, when they're like, okay, how can we make our environment more fun? These are some of the things they throw at you. Oh, we're going to have a pizza party, or we're going to put a ping pong table up, or we're going to have a happy hour that everybody has to go to. These things in and of themselves, and I'm going to be very fast with this, these things in and of themselves aren't fun. Now, I am never going to tell you to not offer me a pizza party. Please always invite me to a pizza party. But if you hold a pizza party, that doesn't instantly mean that people are having fun. What I see is people grabbing a slice of pizza, going back to their desk because they're stressed out about having to write an email, having to answer a customer, having to hit some sort of target. And so they're sitting there typing, hunched over, eating a piece of pizza. You have a ping pong table, right? Because it's fun, but no one's playing it. You force a happy hour, but no one's happy. So I'm not saying don't do any of these things. I'm saying that these things in and of themselves aren't creating a cracking culture. They're creating other things that people feel obligated to do. But you can have a pizza party and people enjoy it. You can have a ping pong table. People just have to feel that it's okay to step away from their desk and go and play ping pong. If you have a happy hour, people should just want to go there because they enjoy the work they do and the people that they work with, and they want to continue building those relationships. So it's this conceptual thing of not forcing these events or these items to create fun, but setting expectation that goals are clear, people are trusted, and interactions are streamlined. If you can do these things, then your culture will be good. And when you do give people a pizza party, they'll actually feel okay enough to enjoy it, that they don't have to rush back to their desk. They can sit around, talk, share a slice of pizza, or go to a happy hour, and they're not stressed out about their work and feel that it's just another hour or hour and a half that they had to actually be on the clock. If you have that kind of environment, people will want to engage in those fun activities, and then they are a value add to your organization. So the overall message here is that make sure your BAU isn't BS. If there's anything that you can take away from today, it's that statement. Make sure your BAU isn't BS. That's cracking culture. I'm Nate Rowlan. I think I've just hit about the time, but I'll pop it up and say any questions.
Yeah, if you do have questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. We're about at time. So want to thank Nate for a great presentation today. So much of what you said was resonating with my experiences, and judging from the comments from people, them as well. And I didn't know about that Elon Musk tweet before this, so I'm still trying to get over that. I think textbooks could be probably written about how not to run a company from the things he's been doing. It's incredible. So yeah, just thank you again for an amazing presentation, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody in the next session. If you want to hop over back to Hop In for that.
Thank you, everybody.